I'm from the Labour Party, I'm proud of it. I know that for some from Hong Kong, the Labour Party politics aren't always clear. Some people think that we're close to the Communist Party. We're really not. I'm certainly not. The Labour Party, in its early years in the UK, when it was first becoming a political force, first standing for elections, there was a fight for what kind of political party we were. Were we revolutionary? Were we about overthrowing the whole state? Or were we a responsible political party seeking to be elected into Parliament? Clause 1 of the Labour Party constitution determines that we are committed to seeking parliamentary representation. We are a democratic socialist political body, nothing else. Communists are not welcome in the Labour Party. So I just make that clear at the outset so that if there's anyone who's in any doubt what we're going to see under a Labour government is, I hope, reassured. And look, I've touched on one of the issues that I've been involved in, but I was on the Foreign Affairs Select Committee and I've had constituents come to me to talk about Hong Kong issues and China issues more widely. There are lots of issues I think will come up in different ways today that I'm already aware of and trying to work through, and I think we'll begin to see addressed and tackled under the new Labour government. BNO status is one. So first of all, access to BNO status. There is still a group of the 1980 to 1997 people who were born whose parents didn't seek BNO status. That needs to be dealt with, that needs to be closed. I will make representations to my own government, to the Home Office, to try and make sure that that is tackled and that people in that group are no longer left sort of unclassified, for want of a better word. Then there is the treatment of those who hold BNO status. If you are in the UK with BNO status because of what's happened in Hong Kong, because of the Communist Party, because you face political persecution, arrest, detention, and lengthy jail sentences for supporting democracy, I actually think it is wrong that we hold a different status. And I am one voice, but I am within the Labour Party seeking to change what BNO status means for Hong Kong citizens who cannot return. If you cannot return, we need to make the system fairer so that you are not facing, if the UK is your permanent home for the foreseeable future, you should not be charged international rates for university or international rates for healthcare, for example. I would like to see those issues addressed to make sure that the UK is more welcoming as a new home for people who have, not by choice, but by the actions of the Chinese Communist Party, been forced to leave Hong Kong on a permanent basis. That's the BNO, some of the BNO issues. There are also issues around passport and the issue about going into the Chinese embassy I'd like to see addressed. But if people want to talk about specifics, we can come on to that. Labour's manifesto promise on the issue of China more widely was about an audit, looking at China's influence within the UK, within different businesses, within different sectors, how China has sought to intervene in British universities and British industry, for example. I would like to see us adopt a firm position. Chinese government officials target Hong Kong and BNO citizens here. There was the attack on democracy activists outside the Manchester visa office. We've seen outright Chinese spy activity in Westminster. The Christie Lee was the most famous one, but there's also the man now facing trial who was working for a Conservative Member of Parliament. You know, the Chinese government has sought to intervene in UK politics in a way that we've never seen before, and to a level that we've never seen before. And the UK response needs to be tougher and firmer and more coordinated, and that's what the audit is designed, I hope, to achieve, and the outcome from that will be tougher action. And obviously in this room, the primary focus is Hong Kong, but there are so many other issues where China's in breach of or is intervening in ways we've not seen before or should not be accepted by the international community. On Taiwan, on Xinjiang, on the South China Sea, there are a range of issues where there should be more concern about the activities of a military, nationalist Chinese Communist Party. Again, as an individual Labour MP, this is not a party position or a government position, but I would like to see the audit and the outcome from that lead to tougher action against individual Chinese government officers and representatives, but also on China more widely. We cannot expect our sanctions on Russia to be effective if we continue to allow China to breach those sanctions and to support Putin's war in Ukraine, for example. It stands to reason that we have to take tougher action one way or another against China if it is the single biggest bankroller and supporter of Putin's government. So I hope to see greater action as a result of that. One other thing I should touch on here, coming back to Hong Kong specifically, is about the Home Office and how it works. The Home Office has been one of the most embarrassing spectacles of UK government. It used to be one of the most important offices of government. It was considered, one of the great offices of state in UK civil service. And I'm afraid in the last 15 years, it's really, it's become a joke. It's become an embarrassment. And Labour will have to turn that around. I think we're seeing action already on some policies. The Rwanda policy is the most famous because 700 million has been spent on nothing. It shouldn't have been happening. Some of the people who are doing things that led to no result will be relocated to do more effective jobs, for example, in clearing asylum claims. And there are Hong Kong asylum claims that should not be taking as long as they are. If you cannot go back to Hong Kong because of you're being targeted for prosecution or arrest, it's unacceptable that you'd be told anything else from the Home Office, and I hope to see swifter action on delivering the results we want for people from Hong Kong going specifically through the asylum process. And then there's this, I just want to finish on the security point as well, because the fact that I have to stand in my constituency, my community, and say that I don't expect any of you who live in this wonderful bit of London to put your hands up at the start of an event because you might be being monitored by a Chinese government official, that is unacceptable. And I want to see greater action from the UK government against those who are responsible for the targeting of Hong Kong democracy activists in the UK. And I want to see more support for those who support, ministers stand up all the time and talk about British values. And this is a case in point. If we don't support Hong Kong democracy activists in the UK to deal with these problems, then how on earth can we claim to be standing up for our values on an international stage? And I've already asked the new security minister to talk to me and to Hong Kong organisations and bodies about extending some of the protections and support that goes to other communities to afford better protection in the UK. So, for example, it's not in a direct analogy, the CST provides support for synagogues and the Jewish community because of the generations of stigma, discrimination, anti-Semitism. We've just seen with the riots in the UK, right-wing led riots targeting immigrant populations and asylum seekers in particular. On the back of that, we've seen additional funding for mosques and for the Muslim community. Likewise here, we have a strong case to make that there are people who, for simply supporting democracy in Hong Kong, they are being targeted by the Chinese Communist Party in the UK in a way that we've never seen before. And I want to see some cyber security extended to Hong Kong BNO holders in the UK, and I want to see some additional security support around how to protect yourself from being followed and from being targeted, otherwise personal safety arrangements. I will, when that meeting comes together, I want other organisations to come with me to that meeting. I want to have that discussion with Dan Jervis, is the new security minister. I hope that it's set up pretty soon. I want to see action. I want to see action on that specific issue before the audit more widely, because I think the audit will take too long. I touched on it because people have raised them with me from constituents from Hong Kong, but the organisations here, you've helped shape the policies I'm seeking either changed or implemented. I think you're right that there is a nervousness amongst new MPs to not be seen to be signing up to something that isn't endorsed by the government, by the whips will be telling, the whips help organise the Labour Party in Parliament and will be telling MPs not to sign anything, basically. I would just suggest, in terms of an easy means of sidestepping that kind of temerity, is to take individual cases, especially if you've got constituents inside any MP's community, and say, look, this is what's happened to this person, and this is the way to prevent it happening or to improve the situation. Would you please write to X minister? And the education example is a good one. Contact the minister and ask them if they're looking at this issue already, what plans the government has to change the situation, how things will improve for my constituent and other constituents affected. Because then you're not asking them to endorse one letter that we all sign up to as sort of sheep. You're asking them to show a bit of leadership on the part of their one individual constituent. So you're getting the same result. If anything, you're getting a better result because you're getting individual MPs write to a minister one-to-one, and you're not getting one letter from an external organisation sent to a minister at face value having 20 MPs signed up to it. Ministers will actually find the individual correspondence more useful in some respects than an endorsement approach that is depersonalised because it doesn't have the specific examples. So I think you get a better outcome from the personalised response. And you'll still be able to say X number of MPs have raised issues on behalf of whichever the organisation, Hong Kong Watch or whoever it might be, and on behalf of Hong Kong BNOs in the UK. You'd still get the outcome. You still get your be able to demonstrate your organisation's influence. Hopefully with more traction with the minister and with the departmental response, because obviously the other side of this is it's not just education secretary or individual ministers. You want the civil servants to know why this is a problem, who is it a problem for, how many people are affected, who cares that those people are affected, and that's the individual MPs taking up the cases. And the more individual examples that are raised, the more influential you're likely to be. Again, if it's one organisation to one, the Perm Secretary or the individual minister, I think that's potentially less effective than taking the case-by-case approach. But that's just, it's early days in a new administration, and as the audit comes forward and we see more of the assessment of the Chinese government's, attempts to influence Britain, then there might be more appetite to do more anyway. So I think the mood will change anyway, but as things stand, that would be my recommendation. Completely unacceptable. By and large, driven by external forces, including Russia and bot accounts. We've seen, in a way that we haven't seen far-right racist protests in the UK like that for some time. It is deeply disappointing. In a way, they exposed themselves for who they are, what they want, because they targeted certain shops. And I don't mean Lush and Greggs and some of the shops, a shoe zone. It just ran. It was theft. It was looting. It was robbery. It wasn't political protest. It was attacks on commercial premises. But there were individual small businesses attacked simply because they had foreign-born or some kind of foreign influence, perceived foreign influence over the ownership or custom of the shop. Again, completely unacceptable. And there was, we know from security and intelligence reports that there were asylum, immigration, lawyers' addresses and business addresses that were shared as a deliberate fuel for the far right to protest. And the far right are angry because Labour has a majority and they feel we will be somehow softer on border security. The border security issues, the last government didn't address some of the border security issues. That's why there are problems. I don't think anyone wants to see people arriving by boat. It is simply not a safe way to come into the UK. And Labour have scrapped the Rwanda policy to stop wasting money, but also to ensure that some of that resource is better used. And I know Panjshir Aid are represented here today. The biggest single group of people who were entering the UK by boat were Afghans. Afghans who were let down by this government, by the previous government. They were abandoned in Afghanistan despite having worked and trained and provided security for British embassy and others in Afghanistan. It's shameful. They should never have been forced to enter the UK that way, and I hope we see a more responsible attitude towards those we owe a debt, as well as those we could do more upstream to support. So, and the same people who are protesting over the last few weeks are the ones who say we shouldn't spend money on aid. Well, if you don't tackle climate change, if you don't prevent conflict in other countries, you create the circumstances where more refugees feel the need to flee and more refugees will need to come into this country. So, it's a self-defeating argument to say to cut aid or to cut our armed forces when we want to have that influence and help shape upstream to prevent people ending up in boats. But this comes back to the point I was trying to make about security, because I don't think the UK government has properly, so far, ever analysed the threat to... so the government has looked at the Chinese spies, the Chinese Communist Party, Chinese government spies in the UK and what they're trying to do, but they haven't, in terms of targeting institutions and targeting government and targeting security resources and critical facilities, but they haven't looked at what those same Chinese government officials are doing to people they consider a threat, but the UK government doesn't consider a threat. So democracy activists are a good example, and that's where there's a gap in what the government doesn't analyse and the Home Office understands, and it needs filling quite quickly, because we've seen how quickly on social media hate and division can be whipped up and excuses found to try and target some people almost wholly because of skin colour. And that really should not be acceptable in Britain in 2024, that has happened. And I'm glad we're seeing some really tough sentences come through for the men, almost wholly men, involved in the violent demonstrations. They are, they're criminals, they will be prosecuted and good, and hopefully that will be a deterrent to others. But yeah, underlying that, we need to get into the security issues and the protection issues that I touched on, about why I want to see the Home Office take more leadership in offering security training and cyber security safety training for people being targeted by foreign governments. It's a similar situation, is it, right? Just like with the previous question, Labour have come into government, there is a system in place that people are trying to work around or through as best they can. And ideally, we want the system to change. And some of us will be pushing hard to try and get a clearer commitment to what will happen with the B&O system, changes so that if you're here more permanently, the healthcare and university fees are dropped if it's going to be a more permanent basis. But until we get there, you'll have to find other ways to work through the system and to find other allies who can support. And I'm a Labour MP, proud of it. But there are allies in other political parties as well. There are. I know that Labour has a big majority, and we will be getting on with improving policies and procedures and turning around the failing Home Office. But there are, voices from other side will still have some influence within Westminster, especially when the select committees get set back up and we have the Home Office, Home Affairs Committee set back up. I hope to see some strong. I really hope that the Tory party doesn't continue to head to the far right. I hope it comes back to the centre, and we have, there's been some consensus and some unity around the UK's position when it comes to Russia, and to some degree to China, and I want to see that continue. I want to hear sensible voices back in the Conservative Party on issues like this, where there should be a unified UK position. So the economic superpower that China's become, second biggest economy on the planet, and of course the more legitimate concern in this situation is we want to take action. I want to see stronger action against the Chinese government from the UK, but it can't be at the cost of those areas where we do have to still work together. And that isn't about economic interest, that is about environmental challenges, and other issues where the Chinese government role will be crucial to tackling problems that the whole planet faces. But we are seeing the crumbling and the Chinese support for Russia has damaged China. China's distortion of BRICS has now left Brazil and other countries feeling it's become exactly what they didn't want, which is an alternative, a political rival and a deliberate rival to UN and other bodies. I think BRICS is losing its relevance because of the states that have been supported to come in. So China's malign influence is more widely seen. In my role on the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, and in a community like this, as diverse as this, with people from all over the planet and heritage all over the planet, I've seen, there is no other government that I've had a discussion with where China hasn't come up, and almost uniformly it's negative. So I think the global shift is there, was beginning to be there. And of course, in the UK, we've seen the direct impact of being too generous to China when it comes to things like steel. The deliberate distortion of the UK domestic market causing a really important sector to UK defence and security services to crumble as a direct result of Chinese government tactics was such a strategic mistake. We will pay for that for some time, and I think that it's one of the reasons I want to see the UK government go further. And I know that I emphasise, this is me as a Labour MP. I will be making my case. I will be seeking the tougher action. I want the audit to lead to more significant and concerted action. But we have to recognise that UK can't do that on our own. And everything we do, we have to try and take allies with us. And where the sanctions on Russia have been most effective is when the EU, the UK and the US have acted in partnership. And we need to see that same approach taken when it comes to Commonwealth countries, the EU and the US, when it comes to a tougher approach to China. And the approach to China has to be, for the Labour Party, from here on in, has to be, Taiwan is absolutely not, that's not going to happen, or you will face not just what Russia has seen, but even tougher response from other countries around the planet. Do I think other countries are there yet? No, not all. Many are, and many soon will be. And I think both Xi Jinping and Putin were surprised at the unity and speed of the reaction to the invasion of Ukraine. And we're still seeing global largesse, pouring into Ukraine to try and help in their defensive and more recently offensive actions. But for the Chinese government to recognise that there is no easy, what did Putin call his Ukraine, the special military operation? There is no equivalent. There is, Taiwan is well defended, and it will not be a simple fight if that's what the Chinese government believes. And the global response will be even more significant than Russia has seen on the back of Ukraine. And in every discussion with Chinese officials from here on, that should be the message. Plus, and I've said this in other meetings we've had, I know, your organisation and I have had, the level of Chinese government representation in the UK needs also to shrink. We can't say, we know there's spy rings targeting Westminster, and we know there's attempts to disrupt UK business and harass democracy activists, and then take no action against the people responsible. We have to trim down their representation in the UK as one very simple and quick means of trying to tackle the malign influence. Sorry, that was longer than intended, but there'll be an official government response when the audit is out, and there'll be actions tagged to that. And if you want to see stronger action, then please, let's have more discussions, let's have more dialogue, keep feeding your views into me. British judges in Hong Kong, that shouldn't still be happening. China has reneged on the agreement we had, and I think it's time we severed some of the ties to the British judiciary and the British judiciary's role in what's been happening in Hong Kong, because it does lend a legitimacy to a process that is illegitimate. And for the UK to look like I know that it's a separate appointment process. But to have any sort of stamp of UK authority is undermining for the UK and damaging for the UK, and it just simply shouldn't be happening. But yeah, those sanctions are crucial for individuals. It's not that you just say the whole government is. You do pinpoint individual people. It can be a difficult process to get through, and the Foreign Office never likes to say exactly who it's going to target and what sectors it's going to target, but it can make a difference. There was the prisoner exchange just recently. We are seeing increasingly states, China included, but Russia, Iran, taking prisoners who are political prisoners. They have charges, China against 2 Canadian citizens included, but people, hostage taking by state, not by an individual criminal body, not by a gang, not a normal ransom situation, but for political aims. So we need to discourage this at all cost, and it's this issue of the UK's authority being lent to a process that is completely illegitimate, that makes it really hard to understand why some of the people involved are still involved. They need to look, and if it takes for me as an individual, I don't understand why they're still involved. If there's a requirement that we're still involved in some way, then we need to look at where that sits and how we can end that requirement fundamentally. And if I can support that, if that's in questions to the Ministry of Justice or some outstanding FCDO contract or agreement, then you just tell me where it sits, and I'll try and influence the ending of the clauses, because China has ended the UK Hong Kong agreement. It no longer has. China no longer respects that agreement, so the UK should be pulling out our end.
追新聞 YouTube 會籍開咗啦，歡迎加入會員撐起追新聞，多謝大家支持。